Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to the 1916 Company. Today we have a real treat. The youthful CEO of Greubel Forsey since August of 2024, Michel, welcome.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so lots of change in the house of Greubel Forsey over the last 5 or so years. We got our first sports watch in 2019 with the Sports Series GMT. We begin to see Balancier sports watches, water-resistant, titanium, luminescent. We see some shuffles in management. We see Greubel and Forsey take back all of the shares of the company from other stakeholders, now reunified under the two founders and run solely by them and you. Tell me a little bit about how the decision was made to reacquire all the shares, first from Richemont, later from other stakeholders, and then we'll get into sort of like a product focus. Just what does it mean to have the founders in control?
Oh, it means that we have complete freedom, which is a fantastic thing to have. For example, if you take the handmade department that we have built today, if you are a listed company, everyone would say there's no way you're going to make a watch like that because of the time required to do just one, because of the very slim profit margins, obviously. So when we have that freedom, we can be much more creative and we can do the things that we're really passionate about.
Now it's interesting because you did reacquire shares, whereas it seems like every other independent in the industry now is selling stakes, usually to Chanel for some reason.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have the whole of Greubel Forsey under your direction now. Let's talk a little bit about where you've recently come from, then what this newfound freedom is going to bring you. We saw a lot of sports watches, and I got to be honest, over the last 4 or 5 years, I started hearing Greubel Forsey management talk in terms of units, product, turnover, language that I expect from an American car company, but not a Swiss watchmaker. What has been the change in perspective and attitude there?
I don't think there's really been a fundamental change. Well, you're right, we have focused on the convex collection, if you will, the sportier watches for a few years now. The idea is to have a nice balance throughout. And while, as we see here, there was a certain period where there was a lot of asymmetric cases, which was interesting back in the time. We focused a little bit on the convex cases today, but in the end, for us, it's just a case. And it's just a different way of expressing ourselves. So moving forward, we do want to have a nice balance between the convex, which we still believe in because it's quite, it's an interesting approach. It makes high horology comfortable. You can wear it on the wrist and it's a bit more accessible and you're less afraid to actually wear a complicated piece, but it's not going to be everything that we do, obviously.
And do you feel like there's going to be a rebalancing towards the kind of watches, for want of a better term, that made Greubel Forsey famous, tourbillon regulators, multi-tourbillon complications?
So I want to say tourbillons, after 20 years of experience since Robert and Stephen started in 2004, we've done quite a lot of them. And I want to say most of our fundamental inventions do focus around the tourbillon. So I think there's a lot more that still remains to be explored. So I wouldn't say we go back to tourbillons necessarily, but we will focus on other inventions and things that we have not explored yet.
We'll get to those in just a second because they have been truly interesting recently. But in terms of volume, back in 2021, all I was hearing about was 300, 400, 500 pieces with a focus really on those numbers. Is that no longer a priority?
That is not a priority now. So the idea was to increase production. So we went from 100 pieces a year to 200, which was sometimes we tell people and people tell us it's still significant, very, very low, but that was a big deal for us. And I think that was probably a good thing because we are 135 people working at Greubel Forsey. And to have that workforce and the atelier for only 100 timepieces a year is a difficult equation to kind of solve. So we went up to 200 and that's basically where we stopped because that's where we're comfortable. And we're afraid that if we would try to go higher, we would have to make concessions in terms of the quality of the finishing, for example. And we don't see any reason why we should increase today. So we do want to guarantee the quality that, Robert and Stephen kind of instilled, and that's what was built over so many years. So that's something we wouldn't ever want to risk. So today at 200 pieces per year, we're in a good place.
And you're in a good place. You've got the goals to control volume, control the company solely through the founders, and then balance the sports watches against the traditional collection. So tell me a little bit about how the collections break down at Greubel Forsey, because it used to just be you had Greubel Forsey watches, now it's bifurcated.
Well, it's you can put a sort of, what's the word there, logic into it, but in the end, I don't think it's going to stay like this forever. Okay. So it's not going to be these two collections for the next 20 years. So as Robert and Stephen always have, it's about being creative. So if we have an idea, let's say tomorrow, for a different kind of case, then we're going to pursue it. If we have an idea for a complication, we're going to pursue it. So it's always kind of, we're going by caliber. So today we have over 33 unique calibers that were built since 2004. And that's the real interest here. So we don't really talk about collections all that much. It helps people understand a little bit of what we do because it is complicated. You know, the spectrum is quite wide in terms of what we do. So that helps, but it's more of a matter of explaining what we do, but it doesn't really, it doesn't dictate the direction that we take.
I get it. It's just a convenient way of organizing the collection as it exists today. There may someday be just one model line. There may someday be 3.
100%, or 20.
Yeah. So now in terms of holding down the production, I think that's a great goal, but it also raises the question of how you grow as a company. How do you define growth if you're going to hold production at 200 pieces? Do you try to take your existing clients and move them up the price tree? Do you try to focus on generally higher price points for new arrivals to the brand? How do you grow a brand when you're constrained by a production figure?
Interesting, because we had this conversation as well with Robert and Stephen. So our whole model is it's built in such a way that you can't grow it. By definition, you kind of hit a limit, which is where we are at today. But since, again, completely independent with Robert and Stephen as the only shareholders, we're not seeking growth necessarily. So we don't have that constraint. No one is asking us for quarterly results, how much did you grow? And it wouldn't really work like that anyway. So we just want to make our clients happy. Basically, we want to continue to surprise and delight with what we do. And if we should make 250 timepieces or 180, in the end, it doesn't really matter all that much to us. We want to just be able to have enough clients supporting us so that we can pursue our investment in R&D with our EWT laboratory, for example. And that's all we are looking for.
No, that's good. Once you've made it, just stay on top.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's a good approach. I like that. So now in terms of investment, you have made quite a bit of investment. Let's talk about facilities and then EWT. So in 2023, you announced an expansion of the La Chaux-de-Fonds manufacture, 2,000, I believe it was 2,000 square meters, and then going up to about
something like that.
Maybe 5,400 or so.
Yeah.
What are you doing with all that extra space if you're holding production down?
So that objective was actually linked to the goal of making 500 timepieces per year, which was abandoned. That's why we've also decided to abandon for the whole project in terms of growing the manufacturing space. So we did part of it. So basically there was a parking garage underneath. So we did convert all that to office space, which we needed. But in terms of just square meters, it's not as important as it is to properly train people. So that's kind of the real bottleneck that we have. So more CNC machines are fine, but that doesn't really matter all that much to us. So we don't necessarily need the space, but we do focus on training people.
And that's great. You're not going to become ETA.
No.
Okay, fair, very fair. So now talking about what you're doing with product development now in terms of EWT, this is not entirely a new thing. You've done experimental technologies in the past. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how it fits into the picture, because I always thought of it as sort of like what AMG is to Mercedes-Benz. It's the bleeding edge of performance and technology.
That's basically it. So it's our internal research platform. So overall, the R&D team is around 20 people, which for us, that is a significant amount of people dedicated purely to R&D. And so for timepieces like the Nano Foudroyant, that's something that, that kind of is made in there and thought of in there. And it's usually, it's what we call fundamental research. So it's research that's conducted not with a specific product in mind, but just research for the sake of learning more about watchmaking. So it has always been there since 2006, actually, I believe, but it's very rare to have a timepiece actually being made by the research platform itself.
Now, in terms of the fruits of that labor, I guess you could say the first recent product of it was the Nano Foudroyant. Tell me a little bit about the thought that went into that design, because it's two things you don't really expect from Greubel Forsey. It looks very simple outwardly, and at 37.9 millimeters, it's not very big. Does this represent philosophical changes?
Yeah, kind of by accident though. So initially the goal of the research was to explore space and energy as the two main constraints that we have as watchmakers. And the initial objective, and it's still our objective, was to have a 180-day power reserve, okay? And we thought that theoretically that's something that could be achieved, but we didn't know how to get there. And so with the research, it's kind of trial and error. You figure out different things. There was this one project where they took the balance wheel when it moves, so it creates a little bit of wind, and they used that wind, they harnessed it as an energy source for a specific complication. Then we ended up not using it, but the nanofudron is only the first sort of stepping stone towards that 180-day power reserve movement. So it was nice for us to be able to prove that it works, that we can use energy on a nanoscale, we can reduce the number of components needed, in this case for the Fudron mechanism, and in turn we can have a much smaller diameter timepiece. So that's the approach with mechanical nano. But to answer your question, yes, indeed. Over the next few years, we are looking to significantly reduce the diameter of our timepieces. And the challenge there being is that the size is quite closely linked to what we call movement architecture, which is something that we love to showcase because in turn we can also showcase hand finishing. But with architecture, you always need space. So it's quite challenging to have an architectural movement in a smaller diameter. But we believe that we found some really nice projects.
And I do think that's interesting because a lot of times I talk about the difference between finish, which is how you decorate a part, and architecture, which is the shape, proportions, and relative position of the pieces relative to each other. So you strive for both, and sometimes you need a little bit of a bigger vitrine, so to speak, to fit all of those elements together. So moving forward now, you've tried to find ways to rally people around the brand, and you've got this concept of the Greubel Forsey family. Could you tell me a little bit about what that is and how that adds value?
So we wanted to get closer to our collectors, basically, because it's something that we've never really focused on too much. Despite being 135 people, we're still a small operation. So 20 for R&D, over 20 just for hand finishing. There's 9 people in the handmade department. So most of the people working for Greubel Forsey actually contribute to making watches. But everything around that is something that we haven't necessarily focused on as much as we would have wanted to. And so the family was actually started because we had a request from a collector if you can do a Zoom call because he took delivery of a timepiece and we didn't know him. And so we did the call and he was super excited and he said, well, thank you so much for taking the time. And we found out that it was his 16th Greubel Forsey timepiece. And we were like, we're here, we can talk, we're just normal people. And so we figured, yeah, we should put something in place to also give back to those who've supported us and trusted us for the past 20 years.
That's an interesting way of looking at it because I think we've all seen organizations that grow up around brands, the Journe Society, the Debatoon Circle, Max Busser has his army,
sure.
And of course you've got your family. So that's a great way to sort of make it more than just a purchase, you sort of add an experience. Are you taking these guys to locations? Are you holding events? I mean, what do you get when you're part of that family?
So we haven't started to roll it out completely. It was just a few weeks ago actually. So now we've ordered a few watchmaking benches. So we want to travel with them, take them to clients. So you can have your piece service, you can have your strap change, and you can have a full report on the performance of your timepiece, for example. We do priority allocation for the Greubel Forsey family. There's a whole list of things that we're working on, but we're going to start rolling this out later this year and then into next year.
Okay, so that's very cool and very interesting. And let's talk a little bit about Greubel Forsey itself. So if you're new to the Greubel Forsey brand and you're an American, you'll get it when I say it's like Michelin star food quality, but with Cheesecake Factory portion sizes. So it's really the best of both, but it's a lot. It's a very intense experience. Finishing has always been one of the defining elements. And let me just ask, in terms of the breakdown of people, you said you have about 135 people working there. Yeah. How many of those people are in some way involved in decoration of cases, dials, and movements?
So finishing internally is over 20 people, just for hand finishing, basically. So it's a significant, proportionally, it's quite a lot, actually. Yeah. And today, hand finishing is still our main bottleneck in terms of production, because that's just somewhere where there's no shortcuts that can be taken. So even if we're super efficient everywhere else, at the end of the day, you're going to have to do hand finishing on a part, and if it takes 30 hours, it takes 30 hours. And especially given that to have this level of finishing for 200 timepieces, give or take, and to have the same level of hand finishing throughout the collection, so whether it's a grand sonnery or maybe something a little bit more entry level, that's where the real challenge is. So today, that's one of the huge challenges that we still face, but it's also what I personally think is what makes Greubel Forsey so special.
Now, it's interesting because having Greubel Forsey on your resume as a person who finishes parts, it's like saying you've worked on a feature film with Francis Ford Coppola. It can launch your career. There are people who finish watch parts for a living who are like independent, and the first thing they list on their website is 6 years at Greubel Forsey or something to that effect.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. So let's talk a little bit about product development and your responsibilities. So you joined the company in 2016. You came from marketing communications. When Antonio Calce was running the company, you were focused on marketing communications for Greubel Forsey. Tell me about how your role has changed, and then tell me a little bit about what your role in product development is.
Okay, so while it was marketing, in terms of the title, we don't actually do marketing, or very little. I mean, we basically have no marketing budget, and the reason for that is that for Robert and Steven, what they wanted is to have the price of the timepiece reflect its value. So if we have a marketing budget, we sponsor, all kinds of people and actors, then it would be reflected in the price, and it wouldn't reflect its true value. So they wanted the value to be intrinsic. So when we talk about marketing, we do basically the bare minimum, just so people can have access and they can see pictures. But that's basically, which I think is quite unique as well at this level. So in terms of product development, the conversation that we're having today is for each new project, we ask ourselves, why does this timepiece deserve to exist? Because there's a lot of watches out there, a lot of great watches, but in whatever it is that we do, we want to add value, and we want it to be, as Robert and Steven intended, important within the context of the history of watchmaking, basically. So it's never to make a product for the sake of making it, selling it. We always want to add something which we feel is valuable and which is very interesting for the collector. We have a team in terms of product development, obviously, and that's been the case for many years now. And the team is quite independent today. So Robert and Steven, they did want to take a bit of a step back so that one day the brand could be independent of its founders, inevitably. So the idea was to kind of make that, plan well ahead, because they're still young. But the idea was just to start early and to kind of progressively go in that direction.
And you're part of that future. That's sort of like your arc. You're going to be one of those people who steps into the void someday?
If I do my job well, then I hope they can keep me. But we'll see.
So that's really interesting to talk about them and their vision. And I guess it's sort of like Quentin Tarantino. Every movie he does is a genre movie. He did his car chase movie, he did his gangster movie, he did his film noir movie, and he's checking off all the genres of classical cinema. And Greubel Forsey's going through the tourbillon, they're going through the minute repeater, the perpetual calendar, different statements based on the history of watchmaking. So tell me about the roles that Robert and Steven play, because although they're both from watchmaking backgrounds, both went through APRP. Steven once told me that he focuses more on the technical side, Robert's more on the aesthetics and the management. How does their workload break down today?
So today they're both more involved in terms of their capacity as shareholders and co-founders. So I have a weekly with Steven where we exchange ideas, basically, talk about whatever it is that we want to talk about, and have Robert on the phone almost every day, but we also have a weekly meeting, but they're no longer involved in day-to-day operations, basically, which, after 20 years, I feel is well-deserved. So it's usually things that I feel that, they should give their input, or things that they should know about. But in terms of the day-to-day, the team today is quite independent, actually.
So you do have people who are now working in product development who are not on an hourly basis in contact with the founders. Do you have a growing creative team that's intrinsic to the company?
So we've always had that, actually. So it's just that we haven't really talked about it. But over maybe the last 15 years, there was already a big team in place. It's just that, the founders' names are on the timepiece, so you kind of associate that Robert and Stephen are literally making the watches, which is not the case. But the team has always been there, and most of them, a lot of them, they started even before Greubel Forsey even existed. So
it makes sense though. If you want to build for the future, you need to have a succession plan. But they're still very much engaged, and I've always kind of wondered, like, how do you use these larger-than-life figures, where you've got Stephen and you've got Robert? And in an era when it seems like the most successful watch brands are personified by some charismatic founder, Max Busser, Richard Mille, F.P. Journe, how do you deploy them to get the most out of them?
That's a really good question. Don't set any kind of barriers. So for Robert, it's, I think there's a lot that he still contributes, and Stephen as well. And today we're in a position where we can still actually get their input on a lot of things. And especially with their experience, sometimes it hurts me a little bit because I'm getting a little bit cocky sometimes. And I did a whole calculation about for some numbers, and I remember I showed it to Stephen, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you should do this and that." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest," but it took me 3 weeks to get there. So it's good to have them on board and have them be active. But I think it's also good for them to not deal with the day-to-day anymore.
No, that makes sense. And I also have a question, because so few people will ever have the privilege of owning a Greubel Forsey. A little bit of an insight, I guess, into what it's like. If I were looking to buy a Greubel Forsey, it's a goal, I've saved up, I've picked the model I want. How well am I supported on the back end? Can these parts be made by a qualified watchmaker in 100 years? Is the company set up for service if I live in North America, Latin America, Asia, the Middle East? How do you handle things like after-sales service, which are such a huge drag on the luxury watch experience?
So luckily, that's something that Robert and Stephen also included since the very beginning. And today we actually get requests to service other brands because there's no one around with the skills to do that. So for each watch, we basically have a bit of a book like this where we detail everything about how to service it, how to build it, challenges that we might have faced, the best way to do everything. So the idea is to have a long-term thing in place, and all of this is on server, so it's all nice and protected. And we do like to pay attention to things like this. We're not here to make a quick buck, and servicing is one of the important things down the road, which you don't really talk about when you're running a business, but in watchmaking, we can tell that for a lot of collectors, it's an important thing, right? Especially at this level, you want to make sure that 100 years from now, someone's going to be able to service your watch. So we do make sure that we will be able to do that.
So you've got like the shop manual for the watch, so anyone can fix the model.
Yeah.
And then do you have a target for turnaround time? Like if I have my Tourbillon 24 secondes and I want this to go in for service, and I really want it back by summer, I'm sending it in January, am I going to have that back by June?
Yeah. We're usually within a few months. If it's a grandson, you might take a little bit longer, obviously. But I think a few months for something like this is very reasonable. Now we do all the servicing at Greubel Forsey because it's quite challenging, and the people who work at the servicing department is quite incredible that they can actually work on over 33 different movements. But yeah, a few months, I think, in my opinion, is okay.
No, that's fine, as long as you've got a plan for that. I don't want to send this to Butcher Bob, my local watchmaker.
Yeah.
So I'm totally hip to that. Let's talk about some of those traditional handcrafts and those skills that you cultivate. Periodically, you've had watches like the Signature 1 or your participation in the Naissance d'une Montre project, or the Handmade 1 and the Handmade 2, where you've tried to cultivate skills that even at Greubel Forsey are fairly rare. Tell me about sort of like that side project to keep these skills alive and where it's taken you.
So the Handmade 1 and Handmade 2 are actually kind of a continuation of the Naissance d'une Montre project, which we did with the Timepieces Foundation. So we saw that the best way, and maybe the only way to keep these skills alive, is to practice them. So it's not something that can be learned in schools, because in the end, schools, they have a responsibility to teach students what they're going to use in their careers, in their watchmaking careers. But if no one is doing this, then they have no reason to teach it, right? And it's something that you can't learn from a book. The best way is in terms of an apprenticeship, and then just continuing to practice them. So Naissance du Monde kind of was a first step in that direction. And then with the Handmade 1 and now Handmade 2, we have a department now which is dedicated solely to handmade timepieces. So for us, handmade, we want to be quite clear about what our definition is as well. So it doesn't mean that it's only hand finished. Every Greubel Forsey is going to be hand finished, obviously, but the actual components of the watch are going to be made using hand operated tools.
I think a lot of people don't quite understand the difference between handmade and hand finished. On a Greubel Forsey watch, it's all going to be hand finished, but parts might be rough cut by a CNC machine or electro spark erosion. Whereas on something like the Handmade 1, every single screw is turned. The tourbillon cage consists of many, many more parts than if it were machined as a monoblock. So you have to cultivate those skills, but also you have to put 6,000 man hours into a Handmade 1 tourbillon, because every part, sort of maybe the sapphire, is handmade.
So we didn't do the sapphire crystal because, again, apparently there's an artisanal way to grow your own sapphire, but we didn't see the point in doing that. Didn't do the sapphire crystal, didn't do the case gaskets, didn't do the jewels. And we decided in the Handmade 1 not to do the mainspring because we wanted to have Greubel Forsey quality even for a handmade watch. So overall, in terms of the tolerances, it's within microns. So the same as CNC basically, but done by hand. So there's a few parts that we decided not to do by hand because, again, it's not a marketing thing where we're saying, hey, we're doing this by hand. It was to find, where can we actually add value and where does it make sense to do by hand. And now with the Handmade 2, we were able to do to cut the jewel for the power reserve. So we have a conical jewel there to do that by hand as well. So we try to get better and then, with small increments kind of reach 100% handmade.
So that's pretty cool because I think if you think 200 watches, maximum production, Handmade 1 is going to be 2 to 3 a year, Handmade 2 maybe just a few more than that, but not many.
No. It's 3 a year.
It's going to be 3 a year. Okay.
Yeah, but not of both. So we're trying to figure out how we can increase production a little bit, but now we're focusing on the Handmade 2, where we're making 3 a year.
Which is very, very exciting. If you want a truly handmade watch, that is the definition. Either that or you have to go back 300 years. So let's talk a little bit
yeah, basically.
In the same universe as Greubel Forsey, and founded before Greubel Forsey, you have this company called CompliTime, which has often been regarded as sort of like the economic engine behind the brand. Obviously they develop products for other brands, but what is the nature of CompliTime today and how does it relate to Greubel Forsey?
So actually, not too long ago, we merged CompliTime with Greubel Forsey because to move from 100 timepieces to 200 was such a significant challenge for us that we needed all the resources basically that we can get. And since the best resources we had were within Greubel Forsey and then CompliTime, we figured this would be a good time to merge the two companies. So today, CompliTime doesn't exist anymore, and the people are just employed by Greubel Forsey instead of CompliTime today.
Now, once upon a time, CompliTime was quite willing to sell, let's say, the best of the best technologies Greubel Forsey had, like the Harry Winston Histoire de Tourbillon. You'd see 4 tourbillon regulators and you'd be like, gee, I wonder where that came from. Is there any more reluctance to maybe give away your best cuts?
A little bit. And we've had that conversation actually where people working at Greubel Forsey, they only know and think in Greubel Forsey quality, right? And there's just no other way for them to do things. So that was indeed interesting that we basically gave away all of that. But they were great projects, and I think very valuable for us as well because we learned tons of stuff in terms of the patents. It allowed us to explore a lot of things. So it was a very good thing to have. But just today we kind of need to focus a little bit on Greubel Forsey. But then in the future we'll see.
So now let me ask you a question about one of the more curious turns the company's taken, and I'm going to let you, dear viewer, decide whether this is up your alley. But I love these synthetic straps that you've been putting on the watches since 2021. They are silky, they are suede. You would never think these are synthetic or not animal-based, but that is the fact. Was this a decision the founders made to go with these non-animal straps? They feel like nubuck leather. They're very interesting on many levels.
Yeah, I like them. I like them a lot as well, actually. And again, we were talking about value before. So for us, a crocodile strap adds to the price, but it doesn't necessarily add to the value. So while we do like to focus on the movement on the case, we figured that at some point now, well into the 21st century, it might be time for us to switch to plant-based straps here, or then basically rubber straps.
Interesting. And again, it's a very intriguing material. It's like a traditional suede on the bottom, nubuck on the top. Difficult to describe. It's a very tactile and sensual type of product, but that's very fascinating, I've always thought. Okay, take me now through the next 2 to 3, and again, this is just a quirky Tim Masso type question about a strap. Back in the real world, take me through what the next 2 to 3 years look like for Greubel Forsey. Like, what is your arc for the company?
Ooh, that's, I want to try to figure out if there's a short answer for this.
Spoiler alert.
No, as I mentioned before, we do want to focus on smaller diameter timepieces. In terms of the models that you're going to see over the next 1 or 2 years, that's something that we want to focus on in a significant way. And that's also, some of the comments that we've gotten is that, this is fantastic, but it's not for everyone's wrist, right? So we figured, it's time to go down that alley and see what we can offer in smaller diameters. In terms of development, we're usually working 10 years ahead. So, whatever you see next year might have been started 10 years ago. Sure. So in terms of radical changes, we rarely have any, I want to say. So things are planned ahead quite nicely. Overall, we are looking for stability. So we're not going to change course. So we're not going to say, hey, we're going to make 1,000 timepieces or we're going to make 20. So we just want to kind of remain stable where we are. We want to continue to have a lot of fun with what we do.
So take me now through let's build like a 5-piece essential Greubel Forsey collection, Michel's Greubel Forsey collection. We're going to put together 5 pieces. What would be in your collection? Take us on a tour of your ideal 5.
Okay, the Balancier Contemporain, 39.6 millimeters. I have a small wrist, perfect
You
for
and me
running.
both.
There you go. And it has that movement architecture that we talked about. So that's something that I find really interesting. The Balancier Contemporain, I want to say GMT. Okay. Because that's one of the iconic things that we've been doing for so long.
The full-fat Greubel Forsey with all the trimmings.
Exactly, yeah. I want to say an Invention Piece 1, because every time I see this watch, which I believe was launched in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, when I look at it, if it were launched today, it would be just as relevant as it was back then. And I think that is quite important for a watch, that to me, it doesn't age, and it's just, every time you look at it, you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. So Invention Piece 1 for me, I've got a soft spot for that. Okay. Perpetual Calendar, Coupé Equation, very underrated, in my opinion, because...
And very rare.
And very rare, yeah, indeed. So it's kind of a thing where I feel to fully appreciate what that watch represents, you already need kind of a collection of perpetual calendars, and you already, must have lived through a few nightmares with those to kind of appreciate what the Coupé Equation actually is able to offer. So the perpetual calendar, definitely. Last one.
Maybe a double tourbillon 30 degree for old time's sake?
Let's add that to the list.
Let's go with that.
100%.
Yeah, very, very cool. So if people want to reach out and touch Greubel Forsey and learn a little bit more, we know you don't do advertising and marketing, but you definitely have some touch points. So how do people get in contact with you?
Then call me on my cell phone, basically. Send us an email. We're simple, normal people, and we're happy to share what we do. So we're not looking to sell anything necessarily. We just want to showcase and share the passion. And I remember actually during, I think it was Dubai Watch Week, where there was kids around, and that was the most fantastic thing. I was able to show Grand Sonnery to basically an 8-year-old kid who didn't know that watches could chime, and to just see the excitement about something like that's really what we live for, basically.
And that's funny because every 8-year-old kid today has a computer in his pocket more powerful than the one we took to the moon.
Yeah,
but he's amazed by this chiming watch.
Exactly, yeah. So, email us.
You can also reach out to us here at the 1916 Company. Michel, thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.